Hello, everyone. Welcome to our session. My name is Ralica Delcheva. I'm a principal architect on the SAP engineering team at Microsoft. In my work, I focus on reference architectures for SAP workloads on Azure, with emphasis on high availability and disaster recovery. I have here with me Will Bratton. Will, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hey everyone, my name is Will Bratton. I'm a product engineering leader at Microsoft Azure. I lead the product management team for our first party SAP platform solutions, which you'll be learning more about in the session today.
So with that, let's go to our agenda. Today, we're going to talk about SAP reference architectures on Azure, what's new in the last several months, and then we'll talk about the different SAP platform solutions that you can utilize on Azure. We'll talk about Azure Center for SAP solutions, the deployment automation framework. We'll talk about Azure Monitor, and last but not least, we'll also cover news around Azure Backup for SAP solutions. Now, as mentioned, we both work on the engineering teams for SAP workloads on Azure. And there is a rich history and there is a deep collaboration between the SAP engineering teams in Microsoft and the engineering teams at SUSE. As you know, SUSE has been it has been a great partner with SAP for more than 20 years. The same is true for Microsoft. The cloud platform on Azure is very much optimized to work well for SAP workloads on Azure. There is a lot of effort and emphasis that goes into reliability, into cost optimizations, and of course, let's not forget the angle of innovation. So with that in mind, I think we feel confident to say that the Azure platform is really a trusted platform for customers to deploy their very critical SAP systems to run on Azure with SLES. Now, I spoke about the deep collaboration between the two companies. We have a very rich portfolio of SAP reference architectures, which cover both the SAP application layer and the database layer for an SAP system. As you know, SAP as an enterprise application has an application stack and has a database layer. We have started many years back with reference architectures, which required more emphasis from the customer to build custom solutions. We have received a lot of feedback over the years that customers are interested in reference architectures which engage more and more first-party solutions from Azure. And that is reflected in the evolution of our reference architectures for the SAP application layer, for instance. You can see here on this slide the links to pretty much each one of the reference architectures we have for the SAP application layer. Nowadays, you don't have to deploy, for instance, anymore NFS file servers. You don't have to make them highly available. We have a couple of solutions which can be used to deploy the SAP shared directories on first-party NFS solutions on Azure. I mentioned also that we have a very deep and rich portfolio for the database layer. On this slide here, we have summarized the links to each one of the SAP reference architectures we have for HANA. We cover both HANA Scale Up and HANA Scale Out. And when you decide and when you choose which one reference architecture to deploy for your specific scenarios, you have a choice. Pretty much each one of the scenarios supported by SAP is also already tested and supported on Azure. Now, let's talk about some news and updates in the world of the SAP reference architectures on Azure. I want to start with the simple mount configuration. So simple mount is a pacemaker configuration, and the motivation behind releasing this new reference architecture and collaborating with the colleagues in SUSE to test it and release it was actually to provide a more simplified configuration for pacemaker and also to ensure that the configuration is more resilient. So let's zoom in and see what are the differences between the classic pacemaker configuration and the simple mount pacemaker configuration. With simple mount, the file systems are not managed anymore by pacemaker. And that's a major improvement when we talk about resilience and reliability for the SAP systems. With the simple mount configuration, you still have your virtual IP, you have the Azure LB resource, you have the SAP service, which is a new resource, and you have the SAP instance resource in Pacemaker. Another change between the classic and the simple mount is that there are new services which need to be in place with simple mount, the SAP Pink and SAP Ponk. And what these services do is that they ensure that the SAP Start as service is not kicked off. It's not started at VM reboot time because now it's managed by the pacemaker cluster. The new reference architecture with simple mount is highly recommended. It's expected to be the default for any new implementations on SLES 15. And yes, I mean, it's both supported by SUSE and recommended by SUSE and Microsoft. Now, let's shift our attention to an update which pertains to the configuration for SAP HANA, high availability configuration for SAP HANA. There is a new hook which was released. It's called SUS Check SRV hook, and it addresses a problem as follows. When an index server for HANA crashes for whatever reason, without this hook, the native behavior is for HANA to perform self-healing, which means it will try to restart the index server on the same virtual machine where it crashed. Now, with large HANA systems, that can have an undesired effect that it could take a very long time for the index server to restart and reload data in memory. Now, enter SUSCheck SRV. With SUSCheck SRV, what happens is that there is an opportunity for a deeper integration between HANA and the pacemaker cluster. There is a configuration which is possible. It is done in the global INI file. With this configuration, you can you can direct whether the cluster should do a kill for the HANA application or if it should do a fence action. Either one will result in migrating the workload to the second cluster node. And the second cluster node, if you already have configured memory preload, which will result in a much smaller impact to the application and a much faster recovery for the SAP application. So it's also a highly recommended configuration. It is possible for as of HANA 2.0 SP5. The last update I would like to mention today has to do with one of the fencing methods that are possible. On SLES on Azure, there are two configurations which are possible for fencing. One is with Stoneit, one is with SBD Stoneit, the other one is with Azure Fence Agent. The update has to do with the Azure Fence Agent. With Azure Fence Agent, with the MSI configuration, you don't have to specify client secrets anymore in the configuration. That is a feature which was demanded by quite a few customers, especially customers with more strict security requirements. So we addressed this feedback with the release of configuration with Azure Fence Agent with MSI. There are some nice side effects from this configuration as well. Now that it is possible to configure Fence Agent with MSI, you don't have to rotate client secrets anymore. As you might be aware, client secrets expire at maximum 24 months. So once they expire, or actually before they expire, it would have been necessary to rotate the secrets, and that's a maintenance overhead. Not the case anymore with MSI. So if you are a customer who already implemented Azure Fence Agent with SPN configuration, and you're approaching the expiration date of your client secret, now would be the time to take a look and switch the configuration to Azure Fence Agent with MSI. And it's already documented, and we also have a documentation guiding you how to perform the switch. Now, with that, I would like to hand off to Will to talk about the platform solutions that we offer for SAP workloads on Azure. Will, take it away.
Thank you very, yeah, thank you very much, Rolitza. Yes, we announced the general availability of Azure Center for SAP Solutions, or ACSS, at Sapphire a few weeks back. And ACSS is a new experience available within the Azure portal. We're thrilled to bring this product to market, as it offers our partners and customers a unified experience for deploying and managing their SAP applications on Azure. This helps accelerate SAP projects and improves operational efficiencies for running SAP on Azure. In July last year, we launched the public preview of ACSS, and since this time, we've had great product adoption and customer feedback that's helped us shape the product strategy. Our customers have deployed and registered hundreds of SAP systems within ACSS, and we have some of the world's largest SAP customers registering their systems in the product. I've been involved with SAP and Azure since we incubated the business back in 2017, and the teams I've led have architected, deployed, and supported mass-scale SAP deployments on Azure. Therefore, I can say with confidence that ACSS is a key differentiator, and that it's an example of the continual investments we're making to ensure that Azure is the best place to run SAP applications. As we were designing ACSS, we've considered three important pillars. The first pillar is the guided SAP deployments. SAP systems can be complex to deploy, especially for customers moving from on-premises and at the pace of cloud innovation. Deployments need to factor special parameterization and special configurations such as storage and network accelerators to drive the performance requirements of the SAP workload. We solved this problem by providing a prescriptive guided SAP deployment experience within ACSS. Customers can deploy S4HANA in a matter of hours instead of days, aligning with the reference architectures and best practices that Rolitza conveyed a moment ago. The available deployment patterns include single systems, distributed, and full high availability systems. On the high availability deployments, this includes Linux Pacemaker and SAP HANA system replication configuration. For those experienced with sizing SAP systems, the deployment also factors the SAPs values for the SAP application layer, and it will map the recommended certified VMs for the SAP application servers for the best price performance ratios. Customers can also see a visual representation of the SAP deployment architecture. It includes the virtual machines for the ABAP System Central Services and NQ Replication Server, the primary and secondary database VMs, and other resources such as the standard load balancer and Azure file shares. This is a cool feature because it enables any course correction before the deployment actually starts. The prescriptive guidance aligns with our SAP HANA to VM storage reference architectures. That said, customers also have the option if they want to customize disk layouts if they choose to do so. So, you may consider doing that if you want to reduce the storage footprint on lower priority systems like Sandbox or training systems. Customers can also customize the name of the Azure resources, to conform to their own naming conventions for virtual machines and storage. Moving to pillar 2, which is focused on intelligent and seamless SAP management. In this pillar, ACSS helps our customers manage SAP systems at SID level. So customers can register existing Windows and Linux ABAP SAP systems inside the product. Before ACSS was around, customers had to manage a bunch of, let's say, discrete virtual machine storage and networking elements. Now customers can start and stop the entire SAP system and individual instances such as application servers, database, and ABAP System Central Services directly from within the Azure portal. This is very useful for maintenance events such as kernel upgrades. Azure Monitor for SAP solutions is now integrated within ACSS, enabling rich monitoring capabilities for your SAP applications. I'll talk about that shortly. Azure Cost Management and Billing summarize costs for a SAP system at the SID level. Quality checks through quality insights to ensure there's no configuration drift from reference architectures and best practices. Personally, I find this a extremely valuable feature, and we've built this based upon their experience of deploying the largest SAP customers on Azure. Azure Backup integration is also now available within ACSS for data protection, for file, backend and snapshot-based backups. Pillar 3 focused on this foundation of innovation. In addition to customers accessing ACSS through the portal, customers, partners, and ISVs can incorporate ACSS into their own solutions through APIs and other tools like PowerShell and Azure CLI. We have partners that have integrated ACSS within their own portals and tools already, and with ACSS, our customers will continue to benefit from that continuous innovation and integration with more Azure services in the future, such as Sentinel for SAP. Relitza, would you be so kind to move to the next slide, please?
Of course.
Thank you very much. Yeah, so how does this work then? This is a kind of simplified overview of how ACSS is working. Our customers have options to deploy their SAP workloads on Azure, using the ACSS prescriptive guided experience I mentioned a moment ago. They can also use our open source SAP deployment automation framework, which we'll talk about a bit later, or other deployment tools of their choice. ACSS then creates a logical representation of each system, a so-called virtual instance for SAP, and that now delivers the SAP awareness to Azure. When that happens, our customers can now operate against an SAP system at SID level, and of course reap all the benefits of the integrated management capabilities such as technical monitoring, backup, and quality checks. Registering of existing SAP systems is not limited to S4HANA, and you can also register SAP NetWeaver systems as well. Next slide, please. Yes. I'm quite enthused about the quality check capability or quality insights feature within this product. As mentioned, we created this feature based on our experiences of deploying the largest SAP estates on hyperscale cloud. The feature ensures that SAP deployments are aligned to reference architecture and best practices, as Relitza spoke of earlier. We have, I think, around 80 pages of technical documentation for SAP on Azure, extensive configurations and parameters. Therefore, we want to make it simpler for our customers to ensure the deployments are aligned with these best practices. This feature ensures a quality SAP deployment, and that's very important for SAP application performance and availability especially. Some of the example checks within this feature include checking the storage design checking the storage design is good, to drive throughput and write latency requirements for the SAP HANA database. It will also check Linux pacemaker configurations to ensure that the configurations is set up correctly for deterministic results during HA events. What also happens here is when it's activated, it enables that drift detection. So that means it checks a customer's SAP deployment every hour and will flag any anomalies, which require remediation. For example, if a customer does an OS update on the weekend, maybe moving from SLES 12 to SLES 15, and maybe overlooks some parameters of configuration on the pacemaker side, these will be flagged, and the customer can then go in and remediate those particular issues. Next slide, please. Yes. So Azure Center for SAP Solutions encapsulates the full range of products, tools, and frameworks. There is no licensing fee for the product. The virtual instance for SAP or VIS brings this SAP workload awareness to Azure, means now we can start operating on an SID level. That being said, the products you see here can also be installed independently as standalone as well. And what we'll now do is we'll talk about the SAP deployment automation framework. Yes. Yeah, so Under the hood of ACSS, we're using Ansible playbooks to drive the ACSS create and SAP install experience. And those playbooks are used for the OS configuration and the SAP installation of the database and the SAP application layer. The automation framework has been around for a couple of years now, and it's targeted at customers that are DevOps savvy. And we created this framework to enable a programmatic deployment of SAP in Azure, again aligned to the reference architectures and best practices. We chose the open source route to drive collaboration and empower customers and partners to drive feature requests. In fact, Suzu worked with us to develop some of these playbooks for the specifics related to the SLES operating system. Automation framework is enabled through a combination of infrastructure as a code and configuration as code. The infrastructure as a code part is via Terraform, and that's responsible for deploying the bedrock SAP infrastructure. So think about virtual machines, storage, accelerators for ultra low latency, and enable high availability scenarios such as deployments across availability zones. The configuration as code part via Ansible configures the operating system, including Linux pacemaker for high availability, and it installs the SAP product as well, whether that's S4HANA or NetWeaver. We can also support scenarios in the framework which aren't yet supported within ACSS, such as SQL Server, Oracle, and DB2. The framework is very useful for driving mass scale deployments where customers need to deploy maybe hundreds of SAP applications in heterogeneous landscapes. One more feature we added recently was the ability to register that virtual instance for SAP, which means customers get the best of both worlds. For example, customer has a mass scale deployment of SAP on SQL Server, registers the virtual instance for SAP as part of the deployment, and now they can benefit from all the goodness of ACSS, which means quality checks, monitoring, data protection, and cost analysis. Coke North America will be presenting with Microsoft at SUSECon this year, and Coke North America used the SAP deployment automation framework to drive their transformation program. So that was an S4HANA deployment on our VHM, or 24 terabyte VMs. And some of the upside you'll hear was the time saved for deployments versus manual, about 90% time saved. There's quality increases for the deployments, no drift from best practices, quality increased by 75%. And of course, cost saving on project spend, reduced human resources and manual labor, that's about a 60% saving as well. And Coke North America are one of the many customers who've experienced the great upsides from using the SAP deployment automation framework. Next slide, please. Thank you. Yes, on Azure Monitor for SAP solutions, the motivation to build this product was feedback from customers. Customers typically have several monitoring solutions from different vendors, which focus on different parts of the SAP system. And that can often involve different teams as well, SAP technical teams, infrastructure monitoring teams, and others. This can be costly to maintain given the different levels of expertise required, and more often than not, difficult to get to the root cause of problems. Our customers wanted a single solution to monitor SAP and help them with rapid root cause analysis. And our solution for that is Azure Monitor for SAP Solutions, or the short name is AMS. AMS is a turnkey and feature-rich technical monitoring solution. It collects telemetry data from the different layers, so the SAP app layer, database, operating system, and Linux HA clusters, in a central location within the Azure portal. It uses Azure Functions as the collector engine, which connects and extracts this telemetry data from the customer's SAP system. The data is then ingested into a log analytics workspace, and it's powered by Azure Workboots for a rich visualization of the data. The product can scale to hundreds of SAP systems to support the largest SAP estates in the world. In terms of some of the features then, technical monitoring is supported for SAP NetWeaver, technical application layer, SAP HANA, SQL Server, IBM DB2, HA Linux pacemaker clusters, and the Linux operating system. There's a whole bunch of out-of-the-box alerts available, including, SAP instance unavailability, or if there's a pacemaker cluster failover event. There's also an SAP HANA data size feature, and that provides insights to validate that the VM is sized appropriately for the memory footprint of the HANA workload. You can gain insights into which tables are contributing towards the largest database growth. Top column are tables by size, number of rows, and trend lines for the size growth over time. And the upside of this one is it enables our customers to budget, for the future based upon those database growth patterns. It also has a tight security posture. TLS is used to secure communication between a customer's SAP system and the AMS resource. And there's also support for private endpoints, so we limit exposure to the public internet from the customer's virtual network. Other features we GA'd with include SAP Insights, so customers can easily identify the root cause of any SAP performance issues. For example, if certain transactions inside SAP are shown, are taking longer to complete, you can check the dialog response breakdown time. Think of that as STO3N inside the system within the SAP metrics and observe the performance of the underlying Azure infrastructure to identify bottlenecks. For example, if you were to see high database request time, that can be indicative of network latency, for example. These are the insights you can get from this particular feature. The SAP Landscape Monitor feature allows you to get the health of the entire SAP estate with minimum navigation steps. You can create a grouping of SAP systems based upon the environment, so if it's development, or if it's production, or even application types like ERP, BW, etc. Customers can also integrate AMS with their own ticketing systems as well, such as ServiceNow. Next slide, please. Yes, Azure Backup for SAP Solutions. Designing for recoverability is very important, which means being able to recover from data loss. For example, logical errors on the SAP database or from large-scale natural disasters. Our solution here, Azure Backup for SAP Solutions, offers a zero infrastructure backups. It's a PaaS service, which means you don't need to manage a whole bunch of VMs or agents. The solution is SAP backend certified and supported for full and incremental backups. Offers performance to about 420 megabytes per second, and we'll be increasing that shortly to 1.5. That's actually working at 1.5 terabytes per hour in terms of performance or in terms of throughput. For recovery point objectives, think around 15 minutes for the log backup, so 15 minutes RPO. It enables one-click point-in-time restores, so if you want to factor in SAP system copies or refreshes. You'll also get long-term retention for compliance and audit. You can retain backups for years based upon policy. Comprehensive data protection strategies for large HANA and any DB systems would include snapshots as well. So you could think about a strategy running multiple daily snapshots, maybe every hour. The first is a full snapshot, and then the subsequent ones will be incremental snapshots. And then, a back-end file-based backup at the weekend. You'd always want to do that to ensure you get checksum verified backup as well. So the best of both worlds, back-end and storage snapshots. Another item in preview is the automatic backup support for SAP HANA system replication after a cluster failover. Eliminates the need to go and manually restart the backup and do reconfiguration. This is taken care of in the product now as well. And finally on this one, Azure Backup is now integrated within the management plane of ACSS for a seamless experience for data protection. Next slide, please. Yes, and I think on this one, here's some excellent resources if you'd like to learn more about SAP and Azure, including the deployment guidelines, the reference architectures that Rolitza was speaking about at the start of today's presentation, and also the SAP platform solutions that we have covered today. Next slide, please. And with that, thank you very much for your time today. Hope that you enjoyed the session.
Yes, thank you. And indeed, I hope that you enjoyed the information presented here today. Thank you. Bye.